Rosalind met Justin at a mutual friend's party 10 years ago. She was 22, had just graduated from college with a degree in marketing, and had landed a job as an assistant manager at Creative Mind, an advertising agency. Justin, 4 years her senior, worked as a foreman at an auto parts factory and was also attending night school to earn a degree in industrial management. That evening, Rosalind arrived at the party wearing a simple blue dress, which turned out to be too dressy for a night of pizza and board games. She felt awkward until she noticed Justin, sitting across from her, furtively adjusting his shirt collar. He had also changed clothes several times before leaving, which she learned much later. Their first conversation took place in the kitchen. Rosalind was looking for a corkscrew, and Justin was hiding from the noisy crowd. They talked for almost an hour before anyone noticed the missing wine. Justin talked about his passion for old motorcycles. He had a half-disassembled 1962 Harley in his garage. Rosalind admitted that she didn't know much about mechanics, but she could talk for hours about modern art. Their first date was at a museum of modern art. Rosalind talked enthusiastically about the installations, and Justin listened attentively, occasionally asking unexpectedly profound questions. A week later, she came to his garage, where Justin showed her the details of his motorcycle and patiently explained how the engine worked. They got engaged a year later. Justin didn't propose in a restaurant or against the backdrop of a sunset. He simply took out the ring after they had finished assembling a wardrobe in their first apartment together. Rosalind accepted without hesitation. The ring was simple, with a small diamond. Justin had saved up for it for 4 months. They decided to have a modest wedding. Rosalind's parents came from Nebraska. Justin's sister and her husband and children came from Colorado, and a few close friends attended. Rosalind planned the menu herself and made arrangements with a small restaurant. Justin insisted on live music. His friend played guitar in a local band. After the wedding, everyday life began. Rosalind threw herself into her work. The agency appreciated her creativity and diligence. She came up with a successful advertising campaign for a chain of sports stores, then for an organic food manufacturer. Her portfolio grew, as did her salary. 3 years later, she became a senior project manager. Justin didn't stand still either. After graduating, he gradually moved up the career ladder. His old shop foreman retired and Justin got the job. The team respected him, and management appreciated him. He had about 40 people working under him. They bought a house in a respectable neighborhood, small but cozy, with a garage for Justin's motorcycle and a study for Rosalind. On weekends, they worked in the garden. Justin discovered a talent for landscaping. In the summer, they had barbecues for friends, and in the winter, they spent evenings by the fireplace. Rosalind's parents came every year for Thanksgiving. Justin learned to bake her mother's signature apple pie. Justin's sister's family visited them for Christmas. The children adored Aunt Rosalind because she always came up with unusual gifts for them. They didn't have children, but they didn't make a big deal out of it. Rosalind loved her job, and Justin was happy with his life. They had mutual friends, shared interests, and plans for the future. Every year they went on vacation, usually choosing new places, but sometimes returning to their favorite town on the coast where they had spent their honeymoon. Their colleagues considered them the perfect couple. Rosalind often came to her husband for lunch, as the factory was only a 20-minute drive from the agency. Justin would pick her up after work if she was running late. On Fridays, they would go on dates, trying new restaurants, going to the movies or the theater. Their marriage wasn't perfect. There were arguments, misunderstandings, and hurt feelings, but they had learned to talk, to compromise, to give in to each other on small things. Justin could spend hours tinkering with his motorcycle, while Rosalind would sit at her laptop working on a new project. They gave each other freedom and space, but they always remained a team. Rosalind had recently been entrusted with a major client at the agency, A chain of shopping centers was planning a large-scale rebranding. This meant more work, but also more opportunities to prove herself. Justin supported her, as always. He was proud of his wife's successes, although he sometimes joked that she would soon become his boss. The last year had been particularly successful. Rosalind won an award at a regional advertising competition, and Justin managed to increase workshop productivity without increasing the workload on the workers. They had finally finished renovating their house and were making plans for the future, maybe buying a cottage by the lake or starting their own business. Everything was fine. At least, it seemed that way. Rosalind woke up to the smell of burnt toast and muffled swearing from the kitchen. Justin was trying to make French toast again, following a recipe from a cooking show. She was greeted by a light smoke and her husband's guilty smile. Maybe we should just order pizza. Rosalind touched the burnt bread. After all, it's Sunday. At 10 in the morning? Justin wrinkled his nose but then laughed. Although, why not? Just no pineapple. Their kitchen looked like a battlefield. Bowls with leftover egg mixture, cinnamon scattered everywhere, and greasy pans. Rosalind began to clean up as usual, but Justin gently pushed her away. Go out to the garden, I'll take care of it. Someone had promised to trim the roses yesterday. It was a warm day. Rosalind knelt down in front of the tea rose bush that she and her husband had brought home from the nursery last year. The roar of a motorcycle came from the garage. Justin was checking the engine after replacing a valve. "Hey, gardener," he called, peeking out of the garage. "Come take a look at this." The garage smelled of motor oil. Justin was standing next to his Harley, covered in grease. "Listen to that," he said, starting the motorcycle. "Can you hear the difference?" Rosalind listened carefully to the roar of the engine. "To be honest, it sounds the same to me." "That's the perfect sound," Justin smiled. "Now we can start planning for the bike fest." The Morrisons stopped by that evening. Helen brought homemade pie, and David brought a bottle of wine. They played Monopoly. Rosalind won, as always, and Justin pointedly accused her of cheating. "It's all a publicity stunt," he grumbled, handing over his last paper money. "She cheats her clients the same way." "Just admit that I know more about real estate," Rosalind winked at Helen. "Even if it's cardboard." David talked about his new project, a residential complex in the suburbs. Justin listened silently, occasionally asking precise technical questions. Rosalind and Helen discussed the new school curriculum. Helen was once again dissatisfied with the changes in the education system. It was already past midnight when Justin saw his guests out and hugged his wife around the shoulders. "You know, sometimes I think this is it, this is happiness. I don't need anything else." Monday morning began with the usual hustle and bustle. Rosalind was looking for a folder with a presentation, while Justin was trying to tie his tie and read the stock market report at the same time. "Maybe we can meet for lunch." Rosalind adjusted her husband's tie. "It's Mario's pasta day today." "Sorry, I can't today." Justin kissed her on the cheek. "I have a meeting with suppliers. I'll order a sandwich." That evening, Rosalind stayed late at the agency because a client requested last-minute changes to a layout. Justin called around 7. "Where are you? I made lasagna." "Really?" She smiled at the screen with the unfinished layout. "Let me guess. Your grandmother's recipe?" "Of course. That's why I took out all the garlic and half the spices." "My hero. I'll be home in half an hour." The house smelled of fresh baking and just a hint of garlic. Justin met her at the door. "I lied about the garlic, but you still love me, right?" They had dinner in the kitchen, discussing their day. Rosalind talked about a difficult client. Justin complained about a delivery delay. An apple pie was baking in the oven. For once, it wasn't burnt. The ceiling fan in the bar lazily stirred the stuffy air. Carol wiped glasses, glancing at the clock. She had 3 hours left on her shift. The bar was empty. The summer heat had driven all the patrons home, or to their air-conditioned offices. She placed another polished glass on the shelf, admiring the way the sunlight played on the facets. Her grandmother, who ran a small bar in Tulsa, had taught her this trick. "People like it when their whiskey is poured into a crystal-clear glass," her grandmother used to say, "even if the whiskey is lousy." Her phone vibrated, a message from her landlord, another reminder about the late rent. Carol sighed as she scrolled through her banking app. She was barely making ends meet. She had been scraping by for the last 3 months, but her tips were barely enough to pay for her tiny studio in a less-than-desirable neighborhood. A gray-haired man in a worn suit entered the bar, a regular customer, Mr. Burke. He came every day at lunchtime, sat down at the bar, and ordered the same cocktail, a Manhattan. Carol started preparing the drink without waiting for his order. "How's your granddaughter?" she asked, measuring out the whiskey. Mr. Burke beamed. He loved talking about his grandchildren. While he was telling her about the school play, Carol remembered her own time on stage, her graduation performance at theater school. She had played Ophelia, and her mother had sat in the front row crying with pride. Back then, it had seemed like the whole world was open to her, just waiting for her to reach out and grab it. New York had not welcomed her. The huge city had swallowed her dreams whole. Endless auditions, tiny roles in the crowd, part-time work as a waitress. For 2 years she clung to a faint hope until she realized it was time to move on. Her mother called her back to Oklahoma, but Carol chose this city. Smaller than New York, quieter. She got a job at Mario's restaurant bar. The owner appreciated her experience and people skills. The pay was low, but it was steady. The bell above the door rang. The lunch rush had begun. Carol smiled as usual and took out the menu. She knew all the regulars. The programmers from the office across the street ordered beer and discussed some code. The lawyers from the neighboring building had double espressos and mineral water. The middle managers had business lunches and complaints about their bosses. The bartender's job was somewhat similar to that of an actor, the same need to keep a straight face, smile, and pay attention to details. The difference was that here you didn't have to pretend to be someone else. It was enough just to listen to people. They would tell their stories themselves. Her small apartment was on the 5th floor of an old building with no elevator. In the evenings, Carol would sit on the fire escape, smoke, and look at the city. Sometimes she would take out old photos, herself in a Juliet costume, her first leading role in the school theater, Mom, Dad, and her on a fishing trip, the last summer before her father left for another woman, a poster with her name in tiny print at the very bottom of the list of extras. In the mornings, she would run in a nearby park, a habit she had picked up in acting school. Then a shower, a cup of strong coffee, and a quick glance at the news. Sometimes she would pop into the bookstore next door. The old owner let her read the books without buying them. Carol would choose something from the classics and settle into a worn armchair by the window. She had learned to read people at the bar. That couple was clearly on their first date, both nervous and laughing a lot. The man in the corner had just had an argument with his wife. He was fiddling with his wedding ring and ordering his 3rd whiskey. A group of young people are celebrating someone's birthday. They'll start singing soon. Her own personal life wasn't going well. She had had a few short romances, with a musician from a jazz band that played at the restaurant on Thursdays, with an English literature teacher from a local college. Nothing serious, just attempts to brighten up her loneliness. Once she tried to enroll in acting classes at a local theater. The teacher praised her natural plasticity, but Carol quickly realized that her former passion for the stage was gone. All that remained was a slight sadness over her unfulfilled dream. In her free evenings, she wrote stories, short sketches from the life of the bar, stories about random visitors. She didn't show them to anyone, just put them in an old notebook. Maybe someday she would pluck up the courage to send them to a magazine. Her shift at the bar started at 11. By that time, the main flow of customers had already subsided, and only the most persistent remained. Carol made coffee, set out glasses, and checked the supplies. Every day was like the one before, and that suited her just fine. That day, Justin arrived at Mario's later than usual. A meeting had run late, and instead of his usual hour, he showed up at the restaurant closer to 2. The dining room was almost empty, with only an elderly couple eating in the far corner. He sat down at the bar, unbuttoning the top button of his shirt. It was a hot day, and the walk from the factory to the restaurant had made him sweat. The bartender he had grown accustomed to seeing here over the past few years was nowhere to be found. An unfamiliar young woman was behind the bar. "Hard day?" she asked, placing a glass of water with ice in front of him. "Can you tell?" Justin nodded gratefully and took a sip. "Anyone who unbuttoned their shirt and sighs heavily is having a hard day," she smiled. "Menu? No, thanks. I'm a regular. Pasta carbonara and a glass of red wine." Carol, that was how she introduced herself, turned out to be a pleasant companion. While Justin waited for his order, they discussed the weather, summer festivals, and a newly opened amusement park. She was a good listener, interjecting sharp remarks at just the right moments. The next day, Justin found himself back at the counter. This time he arrived on time, and the place was packed with office workers occupying all the tables. Carol was barely able to take orders, but she paid attention to every customer, finding time for a quick joke or a kind word. "Try the mushroom ravioli today," she suggested when the rush died down. "Mario has been working on the sauce since this morning." Justin took her advice and didn't regret it. He told her about the factory, and she shared a funny story about a customer who tried to order a martini without olives or vodka. Lunch flew by. Week after week, the new ritual became routine. Justin would walk into the restaurant, sit down at the counter, and chat with Carol. They talked about work, books. She turned out to be an avid reader, and movies. Their tastes were surprisingly similar. Once, she brought him an espresso without waiting for his order. "How did you know I wanted coffee?" "You look tired. On days like this, you always order espresso." Another time, he noticed her hiding a book under the counter, a well-thumbed volume by Tennessee Williams. "I didn't know you liked the theater." "There are many things you don't know about me," she said easily, but something in her voice made him prick up his ears. Carol knew how to create a cozy atmosphere. She remembered which customers preferred their beer colder, who didn't like ice in their cocktails, who was allergic to citrus fruits. She shared stories from the bar with Justin. Funny, sad, strange. Once, he came in a particularly bad mood. Suppliers had missed deadlines and workers were threatening to strike. Carol silently placed a glass of wine and a plate of his favorite pasta in front of him. He caught himself smiling for the first time that day. On rainy days, she would put fresh flowers in a vase on the counter. "So it's not so gray," she explained. Justin remembered how Rosalind bought flowers for the house, but for some reason the thought made him feel vaguely uneasy. Carol told him that she had once dreamed of becoming an actress. There was no bitterness in her voice, only a slight irony. "Life often comes up with better plots than our plans," she remarked as she wiped the glasses. Justin thought he had never heard anyone speak so beautifully about broken dreams. Their conversation became more and more personal. She shared the story of her failed romance with a musician, and he told her about his complicated relationship with his father. At one point, Justin caught himself deliberately taking the longer route to the restaurant so he could spend more time alone and think about what Carol would tell him that evening. They never talked about his family life. Carol had seen his wedding ring but never asked any questions. Maybe that was why it was so easy with her. She didn't demand explanations, didn't try to invade his personal space. She was just there, ready to listen or keep quiet. One day, she confessed that she wrote stories. Nothing special, Just sketches from life, she said, but her cheeks flushed slightly. Justin caught himself wanting to read those stories, to find out how she saw the world, what she thought about when she was alone. In the evening, the bar was almost empty. People preferred to stay home when it was raining. Justin lingered after dinner under the pretext of important papers that needed to be reviewed in silence. Carol was polishing glasses, occasionally glancing at him. "Coffee?" she asked. "Something stronger." She placed a glass of whiskey in front of him. Their fingers touched, an accidental touch that sent a rush of heat through both of them. Carol pulled her hand away and turned toward the shelves, pretending to look for something among the bottles. That evening, he drove her home for the first time. It was pouring rain, and Justin insisted that he couldn't let her go out alone in such weather. The car smelled of leather seats and her perfume. They were silent the whole way, but the silence was charged with tension. He turned off the engine near her house. The rain drummed on the roof, blurring the silhouettes of the few passers-by outside the window. Carol fiddled with the strap of her bag, not daring to get out. "Want to come in?" she asked quietly. "Let's have some coffee." Her apartment was small but cozy. Books lined the shelves, an old floor lamp stood in the corner, and photographs hung on the walls. They never got around to drinking coffee. Justin pulled her toward him as soon as the door closed behind them. He didn't come to the restaurant the next day, or the day after that. On the third day, he showed up, exhausted from insomnia and guilt. Carol was calm and professional. Only her eyes betrayed her excitement. "The usual?" she asked. "Carbonara and red wine?" He nodded, unable to say a word. Their knees touched under the counter. Accidentally or on purpose, it didn't matter anymore. That evening, he drove her home again, and the next day too. They made up excuses to meet. She needed to pick up a book from a store outside the city. He suddenly needed advice on choosing wine for a business meeting. Her apartment became their refuge. Here, they could be themselves, without masks, without conventions, without the past. They cooked dinner, listened to music, talked about everything under the sun, and sometimes they just lay in the dark, listening to each other breathe. Once she confessed, "I didn't want it to turn out this way." He held her tighter, not knowing what to say. Neither of them wanted it. It just happened, dragged on, and spun out of control. Their daily lives turned into a complicated dance. Justin became a master at coming up with excuses for being late to work. Carol pretended not to notice his wedding ring. They met in snatches, an hour here, two there, rare weekends when they managed to get away on the pretext of a business trip. In restaurants, they kept their distance, just a regular customer and a regular bartender. But those who looked closely could see the special signs, accidental touches, secret glances, unspoken phrases. Carol left lipstick marks on his shirts, then carefully removed the stains so no one would notice. Justin hid her scarf, forgotten in the rush, in the glove compartment of his car. In the evenings, they wrote messages to each other, carefully choosing their words. His things appeared in her apartment: a razor in the bathroom, a spare shirt in the closet, his favorite brand of coffee in the kitchen. She learned to cook steak for him just the way he liked it. He knew what music to play to cheer her up. Their secret was as fragile as a house of cards. Every phone call, every unexpected knock on the door made them jump. But they couldn't stop. They had gone too far, gotten too deeply involved. Justin sat in his car, parked a block away from Carol's house. The rain blurred the streetlights, raindrops drumming on the roof. He was late home again, coming up with excuses again. His phone vibrated in his pocket. A message from Rosalind. "Dinner's in the oven. You said you'd be half an hour." He ran his hand over his face. The lights were on in the apartment upstairs. Carol was waiting for him. They had agreed to meet for just an hour, just to talk. As usual, just to talk. Her apartment smelled of freshly brewed coffee. Carol sat in an armchair with her legs tucked under her, wearing a huge knitted sweater. Justin started talking as soon as he crossed the threshold. "She doesn't understand me. We've been living like neighbors for a long time. Shared bills, shared house, and nothing more." Carol stared silently out the window. When he fell silent, she turned to him. "Have you tried talking to her about it?" "Why? She's all wrapped up in her work, her career, her projects, her damn presentations." "How's my job at the bar?" Carol asked quietly. Justin froze. She put her cup on the table. "You know, my mom once said, 'Never trust a man who speaks badly of his wife.'" Another time, they were sitting in her tiny kitchen. Justin was scrolling through his phone, showing her his messages with Rosalind. Short messages about everyday things. "See? Not a single normal conversation. It's all business. Buy this, pay that, bring that." Carol spread jam on her toast, her movements precise and economical. "And that's why you write to me about what a bad wife she is? I just want you to understand." "What exactly? That you're unhappy? Or that I shouldn't feel guilty?" He tried to hug her, but she pulled away. "No, don't. I have to go to work." From time to time, Justin sent Carol long messages complaining about Rosalind's coldness, her excessive devotion to her work, and how she didn't appreciate his successes. Carol replied briefly, or not at all. One evening, as they lay in bed, she asked, "Why are you writing all this to me?" "What exactly?" "About your marriage. About how indifferent she is, how she doesn't care about you. I want you to know the truth." Carol turned to him. "The truth? About how you're cheating on a woman who trusts you? Or about how you're trying to justify yourself by slandering her?" At the bar, they acted as usual, formal, distant. But sometimes Carol caught his eye and saw something new in him, a mixture of guilt and a need to justify himself. Justin continued writing about how Rosalind wasn't interested in his work, how tired he was of her perfectionism, how she didn't understand his needs. Carol read these messages with growing concern. "Stop," she said one day. "I don't want to be the one you complain to about your wife. But I need to share with someone." "No," she shook her head. "You either have to solve your problems or leave. But not by making her out to be a monster to make himself feel better." That night, he sat in his car outside her window again. His phone was in his hand, an unfinished message on the screen. The lights went out in the apartment above him. He deleted the text and drove home, where a cold dinner and his wife's silent reproach awaited him. That evening, Rosalind stayed home late. A client had canceled a meeting at the last minute. She decided to do some things she had been putting off for a long time: sort through papers, organize her mail, tidy up her filing cabinet. Justin's phone was lying on the kitchen table. He had forgotten it for the first time in a long time when he left for work. Rosalind wouldn't have paid any attention to it if it hadn't been for the sound of an incoming message. The screen lit up, and she automatically looked at the notification. "Carol, don't write things like that about her to me. It's not right." Rosalind froze with the folder of documents in her hands. Her head was spinning, but she forced herself to take a deep breath. Maybe it was work-related or a mistake. Her phone beeped again. "Carol, and stop making excuses for what's happening between us by bad-mouthing her." Her hands trembled as she unlocked her phone. Justin had never changed his password. It was their wedding date. Rosalind opened the conversation and began to read, feeling nausea rising in her throat. The messages went back months. She read them sitting at the kitchen table, and with every minute that passed, her world fell apart a little more. Justin had been writing to another woman about how much he hated their marriage, how she, Rosalind, was suffocating him with her ambitions, how cold and indifferent she was. "You have no idea what it's like to come home to someone who doesn't give a damn about you. She's not a woman, she's a walking presentation. Everything is perfect, everything is according to plan. I can't live like this anymore. I'm suffocating in this marriage. Rosalind mechanically noted the time some of the messages were sent. This one was when they were having dinner together on the porch. This one was after she gave him new cufflinks for his birthday. And this one was from the evening when he hugged her before bed. Between the messages full of bile directed at her, there were others, tender, intimate, meant for this Carol. Plans to meet, confessions, compliments. Rosalind read them, and every word pierced her heart like a sharp needle. Details she hadn't noticed before, or didn't want to notice, came flooding back. His late returns from work, business trips on weekends, the scent of unfamiliar perfume she once caught on his shirt and convinced herself was her imagination. She opened the gallery. There were photos there, too. Carol was a beautiful brunette with lively eyes and a soft smile. In one photo, she was standing behind a bar counter, so she worked in a bar or restaurant. Rosalind stood up to pour herself some water, but her legs buckled. She sank back into her chair, staring at her phone as if it were a poisonous snake. Fragments of phrases from what she had read swirled around in her head. She's not cut out for family life, only work and career. You make me feel alive. At home, it's like being in a tomb. I hate that fake smile when she asked me how my day was. In the photos, her husband was smiling, sincerely, openly, the way he used to smile at her. In one photo, he and Carol were in some apartment, which meant they had a place to meet. In another, they were in a park outside the city where he supposedly went for work. Rosalind opened their wedding photos on Justin's phone. There they were, young, happy, confident in their future. She remembered that day in minute detail. She remembered how he looked at her, how he swore his love, how he promised to always be there for her. An incoming call made her jump. It was her assistant from the agency with something urgent about a project. Rosalind answered in a calm, businesslike tone. She discussed the details and gave instructions. She hung up and only then noticed the tears running down her cheeks. The house was quiet. Only the clock on the wall ticked and the refrigerator hummed. Rosalind got up, took a glass and a bottle of wine. She poured herself a drink but didn't drink it. She picked up her husband's phone again and began methodically taking screenshots of the messages. Her hands were no longer shaking. It was getting dark outside. Justin would be back from work soon. Or not from work, now that she knew she couldn't trust his words. He would come into the house, kiss her on the cheek, and ask how her day was, and she would have to smile and say that everything was fine. Rosalind looked at the clock. She had about an hour left to decide what to do next. She opened her email on her phone and started sending screenshots to her work address, one by one, methodically, without missing a single message. Justin entered the house and froze in the doorway. Something was wrong. The lights were on in the living room, but there were no familiar sounds, no TV, no music, only silence. Rosalind was sitting in an armchair with his phone on the coffee table in front of her. "I forgot it this morning," he tried to smile. "You were probably trying to call me?" "No." Her voice sounded unusually calm. "I read your messages with Carol." Justin felt a chill run down his spine. He slowly sank down onto the sofa, not looking at his wife. "You know what's funny?" Rosalind spoke quietly, almost calmly. "That woman, your mistress, turned out to be more decent than you. At least she tried to stop the stream of filth directed at me. I can explain." "Explain what?" She looked up at him. "How much you hate coming home to this house, or how my ambitions are suffocating you. Or maybe you can explain how you managed to write nasty things about me to her right in front of us during our family dinners?" Justin ran his hand over his face. "You don't understand. It all built up. I was desperate." "Desperate?" Rosalind smiled. "When you wrote to her about what an insensitive bitch I was, that was desperation? Or when you planned to meet her and lied to me about business trips, that was desperation too?" She stood up and walked over to the window. You know what really hurts? It's not the cheating, although that hurts too. It's how you slandered me to justify yourself. Every day, every minute, you betrayed not only our marriage but also my memory of us. I loved you, Justin said hoarsely. Loved me? She turned to him. And that's why you wrote to your bartender about what a terrible wife I am? How cold, insensitive, and career-obsessed. Justin jumped up. Isn't that true? You're always at work. You don't care about me or our home. Don't you dare, she cut him off. Don't you dare pretend that I'm to blame for your cowardice. You didn't try to talk to me. You preferred to complain to another woman, slandering your own wife. Carol understands me. Oh, yes, Rosalind smiled again. She understands you so well that she shamed you for those messages. Can you imagine? Even she tried to protect me from your bile. Justin took a step toward her. You went through my phone, and you fucked another woman, and made me out to be a monster. For the first time that evening, Rosalind raised her voice. What's worse? Shut up, he hissed through clenched teeth. Does the truth hurt? She held up the phone. Want me to read your masterpieces? She's not a woman, she's a walking presentation. His hand shot up to her throat so quickly that she didn't have time to flinch. His fingers tightened around her neck and black spots floated before her eyes. The phone fell from her weakened hand. Justin's fingers dug into Rosalind's throat. She tried to push him away, but he was stronger. Her ears rang and the room swam before her eyes. Finally, he let go, and she collapsed to her knees, gasping for air. Are you out of your mind? She croaked, rubbing her throat. Justin stood over her, breathing heavily. His usually calm face was contorted with rage. Rosalind had never seen him like this before. He seemed like a complete stranger. I'm crazy? His voice trembled. You're the one who's been snooping through my phone, reading my private messages. Private? Rosalind struggled to her feet. You write nasty things about me to your mistress and call that private? Justin grabbed her by the hair. A sharp pain shot through her head, and tears sprang from her eyes. He dragged her toward the door, ignoring her screams and attempts to break free. You wanted the truth? He growled, dragging her down the hallway. Here's your truth. I hate this house. I hate your damn job. I hate your self-confidence. Rosalind tried to grab the walls and furniture, but Justin's grip was iron. The framed photographs he dragged her past stared back impassively. A happy couple at the beach, smiling faces, holidays together. Stop it! She screamed, but he didn't seem to hear her. The front door flew open with a crash. The cool evening air hit her face. Justin pushed her out onto the porch with such force that she lost her footing and fell onto the wooden floor. Get out! He towered over her, clenching his fists. Don't you dare come back to my house. Your house? Rosalind sat up with difficulty, feeling her scraped palm sting. It's my house, too. Not anymore. He took a step toward her and she instinctively recoiled. You have your precious office. Go live there. It was dark outside, with only the light from the neighboring houses falling on the lawn. A dog barked somewhere. Rosalind stood up on shaky legs, holding onto the porch railing. You do realize this isn't over, don't you? Her voice was hoarse but firm. Get out, he repeated, taking a step back. And don't you dare come back here. The door slammed shut. Rosalind stood on the porch, pressing her hand to her throat. Her hair was disheveled, her blouse torn. Shadows flickered in the windows of neighboring houses. Someone must have heard the screams, but no one came out. She slowly descended the steps. In her pants pocket, she found only her driver's license and a little cash. She always carried it with her out of habit. Her bag, phone, and car keys were all still in the house. The cold wind chilled her to the bone. Rosalind wrapped her arms around herself and wandered down the street, trying to stay on the lit side. Her head was spinning, her throat hurt, but she kept walking, her feet moving mechanically. A car drove by and slowed down. An elderly woman was behind the wheel. Can I help you? she asked sympathetically through the open window. Rosalind shook her head, trying to smile. I'm fine, thank you. I'm just taking a walk. The car drove away, leaving her in the dark. It was about a half-hour walk to Helen's house. Rosalind shivered from the cold and walked faster, trying not to think about what had just happened in the house she considered her home. Helen opened the door immediately, as if she had been waiting for her. One look at her disheveled friend and she silently stepped aside, letting Rosalind into the house. Hot shower, Helen commanded, pushing her toward the bathroom. I'll get you some clean clothes. Rosalind stood under the hot water until it began to cool. The bruises on her throat turned purple and her head was spinning. Helen left her a tracksuit, soft, cozy, and smelling of fabric softener. Herbal tea was waiting for them in the kitchen. David discreetly went upstairs, leaving the women alone. Rosalind spoke slowly, staring into her cup, about the phone, the messages, the argument. Helen listened silently, her jaw clenched. We'll go get your things in the morning, she finally said. Right now, you need to sleep. The guest room was small but cozy. Rosalind lay awake, staring at the ceiling. It was beginning to get light outside when she finally fell into a deep sleep. Helen woke her at 7 in the morning. David was waiting for them in the kitchen with a thermos of coffee and a determined look on his face. I'm coming with you, he said in a tone that brooked no argument. The drive home took 10 minutes. Justin's car was in the driveway, which meant he hadn't left for work yet. Helen parked right behind it, blocking the exit. David rang the doorbell, long and insistently. Finally, footsteps could be heard inside and the door swung open. A disheveled Justin froze in the doorway. Rosalind is packing, David said calmly. We'll wait here. Helen was already climbing the stairs with Rosalind. In the bedroom, they quickly and methodically packed clothes into suitcases. Documents, a laptop, family photo albums, everything went into bags. Take your time, Helen said, taking things out of the closet. Take everything you need. Justin loitered in the doorway but did not come in. David stood downstairs, ready to intervene at any moment. Rosalind was gathering her cosmetics in the bathroom when she heard her husband's voice. You do realize that this is your fault, don't you? Helen spun around to face him. One more word and I'll call the police. The bruises on her neck were reason enough. In her office, Rosalind grabbed her laptop, folders with documents, and her favorite books. Justin watched her pack her things, his face gradually darkening with anger. You think you're so smart? He hissed through clenched teeth. You think I don't know what you're up to? Get away from the door, Helen said calmly. David, help me carry the suitcases. They loaded the car under the watchful gaze of their neighbors. Some peered out of their windows. Others pretended to water their lawns at such an early hour. Rosalind stood straight, trying not to notice the prying eyes. She was the last to take her bag from the living room. Her phone, keys, and wallet were still there. Justin followed her, leaning against the wall. You'll regret this, he called after her. David stepped between them. Better keep quiet. Rosalind, the car's waiting. At the Morrisons' house, Helen began to unpack her friend's things in the guest room. Rosalind sat on the bed, staring at the suitcases. You can stay with us for now, Helen said, hanging clothes in the closet. Then we'll find you an apartment. There's no rush. David brought them coffee and left for work, giving Rosalind a big hug goodbye. Helen called the school to let them know she was taking the day off. Get some rest, she said, patting her friend on the shoulder. Then we'll decide what to do next. Rosalind nodded, mechanically adjusting the collar of her sweater. The marks on her neck still stung. She took out her phone and opened her email. The screenshots of the conversation were still there. Rosalind sat in her office at the agency, studying a map of the city on her laptop screen. Red dots marked billboards. She knew them all by heart. 3 along the main highway, 2 near the shopping center, one directly across from the factory where Justin worked. There was a knock at the door, and Mike, their technical director, entered. He had once helped Rosalind with her first major project, and they had worked together often since then. "You have a strange order," he said, sitting down on the edge of the desk. "Is it personal?" "You could say that," Rosalind replied, turning the monitor toward him. On the screen was a mock-up of a billboard. Justin was smiling from the photo, an official portrait for the factory's website, where he looked so respectable in an expensive suit. Next to the photo were screenshots of his messages, each word a slap in the face. Mike whistled. "That's my husband," Rosalind finished calmly. "Or rather, soon to be my ex-husband." She showed him the rest of the mock-ups. Each one had the same photo of Justin, but with different messages. In some, he complained about his wife. In others, he disparaged their marriage. And in others, he made plans to meet his mistress. "Can you make them appear all at once? On Monday morning?" Mike scratched the back of his head. "Technically, it's possible, but—" He hesitated. "Maybe we should think it over?" Rosalind touched her neck where Justin's fingerprints were still visible. "I've already thought it over." 2 days later, she met with the owner of the advertising company. Howard had known her for many years. She had brought his firm some big contracts. 6 billboards a week? He studied the request. "In the busiest locations? That won't be cheap." "I'll pay." Rosalind pushed the folder with the mock-up toward him. Howard stared at the image for a long time, then looked up at her. Personal accounts? Personal truth. On Friday, Rosalind arrived at the advertising company's warehouse. Huge canvases lay on the floor, ready for installation. A smiling Justin in a business suit stared into space, and next to him were the lines of his messages, every word carefully chosen to show his true colors. On Sunday evening, she couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in Helen's guest room, imagining how people would drive to work in the morning, how they would stop at the traffic lights and look up, how they would read the text, recognizing the man they thought was a decent family man. Her phone vibrated. A message from Mike. "Everything's ready. The first billboard is already up." Rosalind went to the window. Somewhere out there in the darkness, workers were putting up huge banners. Her revenge was precise and cold, like the presentations her husband had hated so much. In the morning, she took a different route to see it all with her own eyes. The first billboard towered over the intersection. The respectable manager, Justin Foster, smiled at the city, and next to him were his own words about how much he hated his marriage. People in passing cars slowed down to read the text. By lunchtime, the news had spread throughout the city. Photos of the billboards appeared on social media. People shared them, discussed them, argued about them. Some condemned the public shaming. Others admired the accuracy of the strike. Later that evening, Carol called. "Thank you for not putting me on display for everyone to see." "It's not your fault," Rosalind replied. "Everyone is responsible for their own actions." She returned home late. Helen was waiting for her with dinner, but Rosalind couldn't eat. She sat by the window, staring at the illuminated billboard in the distance. The morning shift of security guards at the factory gathered at the entrance earlier than usual. Everyone was staring at the huge billboard across the street. Tom, who had worked there for 15 years, shook his head. "Is that our Foster? It can't be." "It's him." Ray nodded, squinting at the text. "And is that really his message?" The managers began to arrive around 9. They tried not to look at the billboard, but their eyes kept returning to the enlarged face of their colleague. An unscheduled meeting was held in the financial director's office. The phones were ringing off the hook with calls from customers and suppliers. Justin didn't show up for work. He sent a message saying he was sick. At the supermarket near the Foster's house, cashier Betty whispered the details to her colleagues. "I know them both. They came here every day. They seemed like such a decent couple." At the hair salon where Rosaline had been getting her hair cut for the past 5 years, the stylists were discussing the news. "Did you see the bruises on her neck last time?" Sarah adjusted her apron. "I did, but I was too embarrassed to ask." Mario's bar was unusually empty. Carol didn't go to work. She called her boss and took a day off at her own expense. The regulars whispered to each other, glancing at the empty bar. By evening, the local news site had posted photos of all 6 billboards. The article had over 1,000 comments. The moderators couldn't keep up with deleting the most aggressive ones. The next day, Justin had to show up at the factory. When he entered the cafeteria, the room fell silent. People looked away. Conversations died down. Only Aunt May, the cleaning lady, stood up demonstratively and left, slamming her tray loudly. After lunch, his bosses called him into the office. The meeting lasted over 2 hours. Through the frosted glass of the conference room, Justin could be seen jumping up and down, waving his arms. An unpleasant surprise awaited him in the parking lot. Someone had scratched "jerk" on the hood of his car. The security guard pretended not to notice the vandalism. At the gym where Justin had been going for the last 3 years, the administrator politely informed him that his membership had been canceled. When asked why, he replied just as politely that the club reserved the right to choose its customers. His neighbors stopped saying hello. The mailman demonstratively threw his mail at the doorstep without bothering to ring the doorbell. The local priest crossed to the other side of the street when he saw him. On Wednesday, Justin tried to have lunch at a cafe near the factory. The waitress ignored him for 20 minutes, then informed him that the kitchen was closed for special service. Other customers were eating quietly in the dining room. His old friend Marcus, with whom he had been fishing for the past 7 years, sent him a message. "Sorry, old man, but the trip is canceled this weekend. And next weekend, too." His colleagues now only spoke to him about work. No chatting in the smoking room, no jokes at lunch. Just dry reports and short answers to questions. On Friday, Justin discovered that he was no longer being invited to planning meetings. All decisions were now communicated through his secretary, dryly, by email. In the evening, he stopped by the supermarket. The elderly cashier, seeing him, demonstratively closed the register and went on break. He had to stand in another line, feeling the disapproving glances on him. At home, emptiness and silence awaited him. The phone was silent. Even Carol had stopped responding to his messages. It was impossible to escape reality when everyone in town saw his true face. The factory's financial director's office was quiet, except for the rustling of papers in the secretary's hands. Justin sat in the leather visitor's chair for over an hour. Finally, the door opened. "Mr. Howard is ready to see you." The director stood by the window, looking at a billboard across the street. Without turning, he motioned Justin to a chair. "Have a seat, Foster. We need to talk about your future with the company." On the desk was an impressive stack of printouts, letters from clients, complaints from partners, screenshots of press articles. Howard methodically sorted through the papers. "We received a letter from the union. The workers are refusing to obey a manager who," he paused, searching for the right words, "does not meet the company's moral standards." Justin tried to object, but the director raised his hand. "I'm not finished yet. Here are statements from 3 of our largest clients. They are demanding a different manager for their orders." The head of human resources entered the office with some documents. Her heels clicked unnaturally loudly on the parquet floor. She placed the papers in front of Justin. "This is your termination agreement. The company is prepared to pay you 3 months' salary in compensation." "You can't fire me," Justin jumped up. "This is discrimination." "We can," Howard replied calmly, "on the grounds of damage to the company's reputation. Sign the papers, Foster. Don't make this any more difficult." After work, Justin drove to his country club where he was on the board of directors. The security guard at the entrance stared at his pass for a long time. "I'm sorry, sir. Your membership has been suspended by the board." At the bar on the corner, where he sometimes had a drink with his colleagues, the bartender pointedly turned over his favorite glass. "Sorry, we're closing." It was only 6 in the evening. At home, a letter from the bank was waiting for him. His mortgage refinancing had been denied. The wording was vague, but the message was clear. His reputation now had a specific financial value. His phone rang. It was his financial advisor. "Justin, we need to meet urgently. Investors are pulling out of joint projects." At the local golf club, the administrator informed him that his time next week had been given to another client, and the week after that too. In fact, maybe it's time to look for another club. That evening, he tried to book a table at the restaurant where he usually held business meetings. The manager politely informed him that all tables were booked, for the following week too, and for the next month. In his mailbox was a letter from a charity foundation where he was on the board of trustees. His presence at the next meeting was considered undesirable. Justin sat in his empty house, staring at his phone. Even the real estate agent who had recently offered him a lucrative investment opportunity had stopped calling. His social life, business connections, and reputation built up over years had all crumbled like a house of cards. Carol sat on the fire escape of her apartment, staring at a billboard in the distance. A cigarette smoldered between her fingers. She hadn't smoked in 2 years, but today she had bought a pack. An unread message from Justin lit up her phone. She could hear the voices of passers-by discussing the billboards. Carol heard snatches of conversation, and every word hit her like a punch in the stomach. She felt sick at the thought that she had become part of this sordid affair. Her phone vibrated again. Justin was trying to call her for the 10th time that day. Carol imagined him sitting in his empty house, trying to find someone who would listen to him. She would have answered before. Now she wouldn't. There was a knock at the door. Carol knew it was him. He had to come sooner or later. She didn't move, continuing to stare at the city. "Carol, open up!" His voice sounded hollow through the door. "I know you're home." She stubbed out her cigarette. "Go away, Justin. We need to talk." "No, we don't." He banged on the door for another 10 minutes. Carol sat motionless, her arms crossed over her chest. When the knocking finally stopped, she took out her phone and found Rosalind's number in her contacts. The phone rang for a long time. Finally, a calm voice answered. "Hello? It's Carol. She faltered. "I need to apologize." "Don't bother." Rosalind's voice sounded tired. "Your apology won't change anything. I know. I just wanted to say that you did the right thing." There was silence on the line. Then Rosalind replied quietly, "Take care of yourself, Carol, and don't call again." Justin came back that evening. This time he was drunk. His voice echoed through the stairwell. "You left me too, just like her. Everyone left me." Carol stood at the door, her hand pressed against her lips. Mrs. Peterson peeked out of the neighboring apartment. "Should I call the police?" Justin heard her and laughed. "The police? On me? Why not just put me on a billboard?" Carol threw open the door. "Enough. You're drunk. Go away." He tried to step into the apartment, but she blocked his way. "No, Justin. It's over. I love you," he said, reaching out to her. "You're all I have left." "No," she shook her head. "You only love yourself. You've always loved only yourself." He slumped to the floor in the hallway, covering his face with his hands. Carol looked at him, pathetic, broken, having lost everything. There was no trace of the confident man who had smiled from the billboard. "You know what the worst thing is," she said quietly. "It's not that you cheated on your wife. It's how you slandered her to justify yourself, how you made her out to be a monster so you could look like the victim." Justin looked up at her with a cloudy gaze. "Are you against me too?" "No, I just saw the light." She closed the door and leaned against it. His drunken sobs could be heard in the hallway for a long time, then everything fell silent. Carol returned to the fire escape, her refuge, her place for reflection. Night fell on the city. A billboard glowed in the distance, a reminder of how easily lies become a way of life. Carol took out her phone, found Justin's number, and pressed block. The apartment smelled of fresh paint and lemon cleaner. Rosalind was arranging books on the shelves. Helen had insisted that they take all of them from the old house. Sunlight flooded the spacious living room, dancing on the glass cabinet doors. "I think the sofa would look better by the window." Helen squinted, assessing the space. "You can sit and look at the city." The move took only a day. Rosalind didn't want to take her old life with her. Just books, clothes, a laptop, and a few favorite paintings. The rest could stay in the past. David helped assemble the new furniture. Now there was a cozy white kitchen set, a wide bed and a dressing table in the bedroom, and a comfortable desk in the study. Everything was new. Everything was hers. "Should we order pizza?" Helen suggested, unpacking another box of books. "We can discuss what curtains to hang while we're at it." The doorbell rang. The courier had delivered the documents from the lawyer. The divorce had been quick. Justin hadn't put up a fight. Rosalind looked through the papers and marked the necessary points. There were no disputes about property. All she wanted was her freedom. "You know," she said, putting the folder aside, "I thought it would hurt more." Helen sat down next to her on the windowsill. "Hurt more than what?" "Than starting all over again. It's strange, but I don't miss my old life at all." They ate pizza sitting right on the floor. Helen talked about school, her students, David's new project. Rosalind listened, smiled, and for the first time in a long time, felt truly at peace. After dinner, they hung up the paintings. Helen insisted on hanging Rosalind's favorite landscape above the fireplace, the one she had bought with her first paycheck at the agency. "We'll buy flowers tomorrow," Helen said, looking around the room, "and maybe a couple of new cushions for the sofa." "And wine glasses," Rosalind added. "We have to celebrate our new home." In the evening, after Helen had left, Rosalind stood at the window, looking at the city lights. Somewhere out there, in another part of the city, stood their old house, but she no longer felt any connection to it. Over the weekend, she and Helen went shopping, choosing curtains, buying dishes, and looking at houseplants. Rosalind caught herself thinking that she hadn't felt this free in a long time. Her project at work was progressing well. The clients were satisfied, and her bosses had put her in charge of a new department. Life was moving forward, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was heading in the right direction. In the evenings, she read on the sofa by the window, drank tea from her new cups, and worked at her comfortable desk in her study. No one complained about her late meetings or accused her of being overly career-driven. Sometimes she and Helen would have girls' nights in, watching movies, discussing books, and sharing news. On such evenings, the apartment was filled with laughter and conversation, and Rosalind understood that this was true happiness. No need to care about other people's opinions or conform to their expectations. The divorce was finalized quickly. Rosalind didn't even go to the last hearing. Her lawyer took care of everything. She simply signed the documents and sent her copy of the marriage certificate by registered mail. There was not a single photograph from her past life in her new apartment, only the future, bright and spacious like these sun-drenched rooms. And next to her were people who supported her without asking for anything in return.